Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook. I want to talk to you about the latest episode of Star Trek Picard Season 2. It was called Assimilation. And as it begins, we're right where we left off last week with the husband character, hubby, Seven's husband in this reality, and his goons are confronting our heroes because they now realize that they're not who they're supposed to be. And so Seven plays it off like they're on a secret mission to try to get out of it, but hubby doesn't buy it. So things come to blows and the crew takes out hubby and his goons. Things then get rocky when starships pursue our heroes, and somehow our heroes are able to take out one of the starships with a single torpedo. I don't know how that happened. But then after being knocked over, the Borg queen is out of her container. And she hooks herself into the ship and takes out more starships with what looked like green energy, meaning that she somehow altered the ship's torpedoes. But this was after she crawled around on the floor on her hands because she's just a torso, scaring the crap out of the good doctor, after which she slingshots the ship around the sun and back in time. And it was pretty cool because they used a sort of sequence to depict this that was very similar to what they did in The Voyage Home when Kirk and company slingshot around the sun in The Bird of Prey. It sort of, slowed down and it focused on each of the members of the crew, their head. It was like a headshot and they had like a stunned look. So it was similar to, and you could hear like muffled talking. So it was kind of like what they did in The Voyage Home. Upon arrival in 2024, the ship is in rough shape, barely controllable, and it's actually pulled down by Earth's gravity, but for some reason doesn't burn up in the atmosphere. I don't know how that happened, but with minimal nav control restored at the last moment, Picard does manage to crash the ship safely in the fields of his future vineyard, while Q taunts him. So Q shows up briefly and is like taunting him. Meanwhile, Elnor, who had been shot in the old occasion with hubby, dies when power to the sick bay goes out. Rafi takes this very badly for some reason and goes off on Picard, accusing him of playing Q's games with him for decades for sport, which isn't like an accurate characterization at all, to say the least. As if he enjoyed it, and that's no. But he refutes that. And it was weird because before she didn't seem to know what a Q was. So how does she suddenly realize, or become aware of Picard's history with Q? It didn't make sense. Anyway, she goes off half-cocked on the idea that if they succeed in the mission, it will bring Elnor back. But I have to say, I'm glad we won't see him, that we won't have to deal with him for most of the season, I'm guessing, while they're in the past. Because he's a bad character. And, it's interesting because this is two characters now from last season that are not going to be in the show, Elnor and Soji. Which, I think it's good because not only is he a bad character, but and she's kind of a bad character, but not only that, but writing for that many characters for the whole season probably would not have been good. It would have made the show crappy. And so it would seem they've wisely sidelined two characters to prevent that from happening. So I think that's very cool. It may just be that they've done this to make room for other characters that are going to be introduced or that will feature more this season than last season. But if one of those characters is Laris, I'll be happy for that because I think she's a much better character than Elnor or Soji. So we'll have to see. I don't actually know if she's going to be in it any more than she already has been, but we'll see. The good doctor urges Rios to be careful not to disrupt the timeline and to also avoid detection by any system on Earth that might detect 24th century technology in his body, or in the bodies of the rest of the crew for that matter, that it wouldn't recognize, because somehow that would be the same as a person discovering a future device or something and causing a change in the timeline, which doesn't make sense. I mean, because if an Earth system, in the 21st century detected a foreign body in someone, that came from the 24th century, it wouldn't know that it was a futuristic device. It just wouldn't be able to recognize it. So I don't know how that would disrupt anything, because nobody would know what it was. So anyway, it turns out that they have to revive the Borg Queen, who's drained of her energy because she expended so much of it taking the ship back in time, and she can't communicate verbally now. She can only communicate, mentally, like she would with the collective. And Picard says that he can't allow her into his mind because he could be assimilated far too easily since she already knows his mind. But the good doctor decides to jack herself in, even though Picard is very upset about that idea because he's afraid that she'll be overtaken. The crew decides to use the transporter to get to LA from France to find the Watcher, even though beaming into a random place might get them seen by members of the public. But their other option was to take a commercial flight or whatever, so there you go. They then dress themselves for the period using clothes that are already on the ship, which didn't make sense. I guess the idea is they're clothes that could pass for clothes of the period that wouldn't stand out as not from the period. I guess they can get away with that. And while getting dressed, Seven catches herself in the mirror again and is again taken back by the fact that she doesn't have her implants. And it was pretty cool because the mirror that she looks in was shaped like the one in Kirk's quarters on the Enterprise in the original series. So it's a little bit of an Easter egg there. When they beam into LA, they appear separately. Someone does in fact see Seven arrive as a cool version of California Dreaming plays. But she trusts this little girl who sees her to keep the secret after she asks Seven if she's a superhero, which is kind of funny. Rios comes in hot, materializing in midair and slamming into a fire escape before hitting the pavement, and then gets taken to a hospital by a passerby because he's unconscious, but not before dropping his comm badge in the emergency room or wherever, and it's found by a kid. Raffi is accosted by a miscreant in the spot where she materializes. He demands her wallet. She immediately takes him down, which is kind of funny. And then she takes his wallet. She takes his money, which of course they're going to need to get things done. This scene with Raffi takes place in a homeless camp, and it causes Raffi to make some commentary on the state of society, homelessness and so forth, which the anti-woke crowd will harp on and call out for, as an example of wokeness. But it's just exactly what someone from the 24th century, from, the Star Trek's 24th century would say and has said in the past when, or the 23rd century, when either the 23rd century crew has traveled back in time or the 24th century crew, one of them has traveled back in time or observed a video from the period or a hologram. They always comment on how barbaric it was and all that stuff. So it's nothing new, but that's not going to stop them from jumping on it. Back to Picard and Agnes, aka the Good Doctor. They're trying to wake up the Queen, but the Queen gives Agnes a little bit of trouble and is accessing her various emotions, one being anger, causing her to briefly have a go at Picard, like insult him and basically take his inventory. But she moves on to different emotions pretty quickly because the Borg Queen's just kind of going through her mind. It was actually a pretty cool scene, and the actor playing Agnes did a good job cycling quickly through different emotions. And at one point, both characters each became each other. They became one and also each other. They were speaking in tandem at certain parts. And the Borg Queen even speaks with Agnes's voice at one point, while Agnes was speaking to Picard at one point in a sort of altered Borg-like voice, addressing him as Locutus. It was pretty cool, actually. When Seven and Raffi try to access the top of a particular tower in LA so that they can scan for alien signals, they're stopped by a security guard, but Seven tricks him with a story about how she and Raffi are there to take a cellular photograph of the location of their first date, and he falls for it. And it was pretty cool because it was funny. She kept saying things like, "We're here to take a cellular photograph or to record a photograph," and Raffi keeps going, "Picture, it's just called a picture." And so it was pretty funny. Rios meets a doctor named Teresa who explains that her clinic often treats people who come in off the street and who, don't want
any imperial entanglements,
as it were. And he starts telling her part of a story about his childhood when the doctor asks him to, so as to distract him while she resets his dislocated fingers without him being able to brace for it. And he then encounters the kid in the hallway who found his comm badge and talks to him a little bit to try to get it back. And it turns out that he's Teresa's son. Back on the ship, the Borg Queen is back to herself, and she has sort of a creepy conversation with Picard, saying that she wants control of the ship in return for helping them figure out how to reach the Watcher and to tell them the point at which the divergence occurs. But it turns out that Agnes had already found the location of the Watcher while inside the Queen's head, but they still don't know when exactly the divergence occurs, and of course they're not going to give her control over the ship. Back at the clinic, there's an immigration raid, and both the doctor and Rios get arrested when they try to stop it. And I'm sensing that the next episode is going to feature a rescue Chekhov type of mission, a la, again, Star Trek 4. So we'll have to see. His comm badge gets left behind at the clinic, so they're going to eventually find it there, I'm guessing, and then try to figure out what happened, and they're going to end up having to rescue him. I think we're going to see that in the next episode or the one after that. I continue to like this season. They haven't done anything crazy yet or bad yet that I have seen. I think all of the cast members are doing a good job in their parts. Jeri Ryan is just fantastic. I thought that Rafi's level of distraughtness, is that a word? It is now, over Elnor dying was a little misplaced. I wasn't buying it, but it's a minor thing. I think the rest of it was fine. I remain bummed out that we're not seeing that crazy, freaky, utopian or dystopian future, because I thought that was very interesting. I'm not sure how interesting this whole plotline is going to be. So far, their presence in the past wasn't terribly interesting, but it's early yet, so we'll have to see. That's really it. I don't have anything else to say about this episode. It was okay. I didn't see any problems with it other than what I mentioned. And I think the cast did a great job. So there you go. I'll be back with a review of the next episode once it's released. Until then, I wish you all peace and long life.